Hello, welcome to today's webinar. We are happy to have you with us for this Getting to Zero session. It's getting better. The Building Electrification Technology Roadmap is here. I am Connie Umphris, Communications Manager here at New Buildings Institute. A quick acknowledgement of the sponsors you see on the screen. Their support of this webinar series provides ongoing opportunities for knowledge sharing around actionable solutions to drive the highest level of efficiency in buildings. You are muted and we cannot hear you. This helps keep the background noise down so that everyone can better hear the speakers. I want to direct you to the dashboard that you should be able to see on the right-hand side of your screen. If you are having technical difficulties and cannot see the slides or hear our speakers, you can use the question pane in this dashboard to let us know, and we will help you as we go. We will take a few questions in the middle and again at the end of the presentation. Please ask questions in that same question pane. Please take a moment to answer the survey at the end of the webinar. We consider your input in the planning of future sessions. If you are seeking AIA credits, this survey is where you will share your AIA number for credit submission. The session is being recorded. All registrants will receive an email tomorrow with links to the recording and slides for the session. If you need a certificate of attendance for your records, it will also be a part of tomorrow's follow-up. I'd like to pass the microphone to my NBI colleague, Kathy Higgins. She's the Director of Research. Kathy, over to you.
Thank you, Connie, and welcome everyone. And we know many of you join NBI for a multitude of our webinars that we put on related to zero carbon and zero energy. And thank you for joining us. We're really excited to present this Building Electrification Technology Roadmap today with my colleague Alexi Miller, that he and I were the lead authors, and then have our colleague from Point Energy, Alexis Carolinas, join us to give us some really field examples of projects. So today we're going to first cover the BETR research roadmap. And we've got 4 sections, as you see on the left of the slide, where we're going to walk through that in these 4 sections, going back and forth with Alexi. And then Alexis is going to give us some electrification examples from her work at Point Energy. So let's get going. The BETR, let me get my activated here. So introducing the Building Electrification Technology Roadmap. What a great name, huh? Because it's got to get better in terms of reducing carbon and energy use in buildings. I want to recognize the partnership with Building Decarbonization Coalition and our utility funders in California. This was funded by California Utilities, and so it is a California-focused roadmap, but it's very transferable to other regions with just some modifications. And if you're in other parts of the country, we would be glad to work with you on making a version that might apply to your region. There's some partners that worked with us on it. So what it is about is a roadmap for efficiency program administrators. That's the audience that funded it. They wanted information regarding what should they be doing to accelerate all electric technologies. And that definition for the purpose of this work was about electric technologies that displace incumbent gas technologies. So not every electric technology that goes in a residential or electric or commercial building, but those that could displace and reduce both energy use and carbon due to on-site use of gas technologies. And the key 3 things you're going to find in BETR is what's the technical status of the technologies now? Where are they now on the road to adoption? What is their progression to readiness? And what can we do to overcome barriers? So the why this is such a driver, it's going to vary somewhat by region, but I think that anyone attending this is well aware of the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the intense attention to efficiency for many decades that now is driving technologies that are not only highly efficient, but also interactive with reducing grid at the site and in the grid. Reducing energy. And in California, they have some very aggressive goals, as you see on the website. And one of the most compelling things for California is in this direction, that the fact that over almost 90% of space heating and water heating are currently served in California in homes by fossil fuels. So when they're trying to make their climate action plans at a city level, at a corporate level for sustainable reporting, or at the state level, you've got to address site carbon emissions. And you also see on this table on the lower right that heat pumps, which are a major solution, as you'll see through our research, only currently have about 2% market share. So the drivers for doing this are well known to the parties in terms of climate, health, and equity. We get a very strong representation of change in those areas. But this last one, technology advancements, is another one that we in the efficiency industry should really keep front and center, because corporations, business owners, homeowners, they actually are very attracted to getting the newest and most advanced technology. So it's another pull, if you will, for why to electrify buildings. So the Building Electrification Technology Roadmap BETR is framed into these sections you see on the left, which is generally just 5 major sections: introduction, methodologies, technologies, the packages. We're going to speak to those and give you a way to see how to navigate through this 100-page, as you see up here on the left, it's over 100 pages. It's very deep research, but this part that's pulled out over on the right shows you that in each of the end uses areas that you see in the icons, we have the details on the impact and importance of that end use, the status of the technologies they're in, and the roadblocks and recommendations. And then, because we know not everyone's going to look at a 100-page research report for the details, we do have a 32-page, very graphical highlight document called the summary. And you'll see at the end how to link into these and access them. And the really, I think, very progressive approach that Alexi and I took in developing this roadmap is to do it in a layered way. So when you get into it, even the 100-page one, you'll see bulleted details like here on the left, and you'll be able to look at things that are concisely written, but are better yet detailed on every technology, on the status, roadblocks, and recommendations. And then the second layer of information is that we use tables to bring forward the same information at a little higher level. And we approach things through the solution channels. These channels are the typical emerging technology solution channels. So everything is mapped to channels in terms of how to approach changing the adoption curves for these technologies and increasing adoption. And then lastly, we layer the last layer with the kind of at-a-glance graphics. So that's the way the layering of information is presented in our research roadmap. So now we're in section 2, which is to get a little deeper on the technologies. And Alexi is going to take on and introduce this part to everyone.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah. Hi, this is Alexi Miller, Associate Technical Director with New Buildings Institute. So I'm going to talk a bit about what technologies were covered within BETR and how we characterized those technologies. We looked at 38 different technologies, or some you might think of them as energy efficiency measures, if that's a phrase that rings true to you over the years, over 4 major end uses, as you saw earlier: water heating, space heating, cooking, and clothes drying and laundry. We looked at these 38 technologies to try to get a pretty comprehensive look at what are all the things you can do in a building to electrify an existing or incumbent gas technology. And we looked at both new and existing construction, so retrofits to existing construction, also 5 major sectors that are representative of the great majority of building types, and you can see those listed there. The graphic on the right there shows the technologies that we're talking about here, and without going into those in great detail, you can see that it's a reasonably comprehensive look at electrification technologies in buildings. Having come up with that list of 38 different technology options, we then, and all the different parameters of new and existing and small commercial versus single family residential, then we said, where is each of those technologies at today, and where are they on the road to adoption? Like we were talking about at the beginning there, these are the 5 primary characterization parameters. So how ready is the technology in terms of time, now, next few years, 5 to 10 years out? How available is it? Can I go to the hardware store or another place and get it off the shelf? How easy is it in terms of application? Are there major site barriers, for example, needing rewiring in an existing building retrofit? That would be a site barrier, or the need for venting might be a site barrier. What's the awareness in the market and the industry of this technology? low, medium, high. And then finally, very importantly, what is the scale of greenhouse gas reductions that this technology offers relative to other electrification measures? Is this a big player or a bit player? Having done 1, 2, or 3 characterizations, right, high, medium, low on all 3 of those, then we say, well, what's the technology status of each of those? So what's showing here is an example of one of those at-a-glance graphics that are in the roadmap in BETR, to say, where are space heating technologies at right now? So here are, what is that, a dozen or so different space heating technologies listed. And you can see those balls. Empty means relatively low score. Filled green circle there means relatively high score. And you can see in the graphic where they are, how they're scored across those 5 categories: readiness, availability, application, awareness, and greenhouse gas reductions. Plus what kind of building types they apply to, and whether it is highly applicable or moderately applicable to existing or new buildings. So for example, there are, as you might expect, there are 4 of these, right? The 4 end uses: space heating, water heating, cooking, and clothes drying, laundry. And what these tell us is we can kind of look at this and see at a glance, well, there are a lot of heat pump options that are technologically ready. Those are the dark circles. Many of them are available right now. Several of them have pretty high or moderate greenhouse gas reductions. The awareness is pretty good. Sometimes there are site application barriers, right? So you can go row by row, you can go column by column and figure out what makes the most sense to focus on for electrification. Some of the key findings here, for example, there are lots of heat pump options ready and available. There are also electric resistance options, but they have lower efficiency and lower greenhouse gas reduction benefits. They're also available. And there are emerging products coming out. Those are across the bottom there. They're not here yet, but there are some exciting upcoming products here. We also have in the roadmap itself more content on international and emerging products that doesn't necessarily fit into these tables.
All right, here I am on water heating. So the heat pump water heater is really the technology that's going to displace gas incumbent water heating. As you saw in the beginning in California, that's the predominant fuel source and technology in use for residential, and in commercial, where central plants, water plants, are used in multifamily, those are often served by gas boilers as well. Or if they're served by electric resistance, as is a fair portion of some of the home areas where gas isn't as widely available, then the heat pump water heater is not displacing the carbon or emission reduction at the site, but highly more efficient, 2 to 4 times more efficient than any electric product. And then the efficiency of the heat pump water heater is one of the great benefits in those changes. And as Alexi was pointing out here, you can readily see the top 2 sections here where you've got lots of 240 volt heat pump water heaters. These have been around for 30 years. I actually used to sell heat pump water heaters in my 20s as a new technology here in Portland, Oregon. And they're very proven technology. They're very under adopted. We're going to change that. So what you're seeing on the left side and the arrows, those are just from the snapshot, some of your quick takeaways. If you've got new construction, every new home being built should be built with a heat pump water heater. There aren't any barriers there. If the retrofit, if the power is available at the retrofit already, then that's a good place for the 240s also. We're looking forward to the 120 volt heat pump water heater coming into the market. They've just announced their very first products to market this quarter, and several more coming to market in the upcoming year of 2021, and in addition, a large research plan underway through the Advanced Water Heating Initiative along the West Coast. So we've got good technologies ready to displace some barriers at retrofit in terms of not wanting to upgrade wiring, but some products emerging to take care of that. Next, I'll give you a little briefing on the cooking item, and that's that induction is really the technology to displace the gas incumbent for both commercial cooking and for residential. If you've seen anything in the news about induction cooking, you've seen how resistant people are to change out of their gas stove and how thrilled they are when they do. So that's the takeaway on induction. It is a price point higher as an industry, again, as an efficiency program, as the audience for this. They've got to get both the messaging in place regarding the reliability, the safety, the better environment, the responsiveness, the great cooking experience you have, as well as working on some incentives to fill that gap on cooking. Lexi?
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I was muted there. Finally, I wanted to mention, clothes drying and laundry as well, since we do focus on all four of these end uses, and we recognize that heat pumps, especially space heating and water heating heat pumps, those are the real workhorses of electrification. But as Kathy said, induction cooking is also pretty exciting. On the laundry side, heat pump dryers and combo washer dryers, which use a condensing drying technology, those are the recommended technologies right now to focus on for electrification in residential buildings. Electric resistance dryers, they work fine. They're in a lot of buildings. They're pretty much the standard, more common even than gas, but they're not nearly as efficient, and a heat pump or a condensing dryer is significantly more efficient. So there's some product development to be done, especially making them into larger products that are sort of more in line with consumer expectations and what people are used to here in this country. But that's not a huge lift. So there's program work to be done in terms of incentive and encouraging manufacturers to get the products going and build this market. So I wanted to talk a bit about the impacts. We mentioned there are 4 broad sections in the report and that we'll talk about today. We did a fair amount of work within BETR to figure out how big are the impacts of doing these electrification tasks, of installing these technologies in buildings and displacing that gas. The grid is the grid is decarbonizing very quickly, at different rates in different places across the country and across the world. And that's very encouraging, but a green grid is not enough because buildings play such a central role in the grid ecosystem, in the utility energy ecosystem. Those buildings have the potential to accelerate the decarbonization on the grid through time of use energy efficiency, demand flexibility, and other strategies, or they can slow and limit the progress. On top of that, as the grid cleans up, the electricity that is delivered to buildings becomes cleaner and cleaner, right? It has a lower inherent carbon impact per kilowatt hour. But the gas system is cleaning up very little and not nearly as fast as that. So the carbon impact associated with burning gas in buildings stays pretty near flat, while the electricity impact starts going down significantly. So if we're serious about decarbonizing, we need to do both the grid and the buildings. So we talked about trying to figure out how much can you get out of building electrification. What does it mean in terms of energy and emissions? We did some modeling in the residential sector. You can see on the left is the packages for single family. On the right are the packages for multifamily. And what we did was we modeled a gas baseline case that's left in each of these 2 cases, an all-electric BETR case and an all-electric BEST case. All-electric BETR case is sort of today's incumbent technology, relatively low cost. For example, an electric resistance range, even though that is not the recommended electrification technology, I would recommend people go induction for the much better experience and cooking performance. Nonetheless, it's really common and it's cheap to install first cost. So, this is the moderate efficiency electrification case, the best case. Across single family and multifamily, what we did then is we worked with EPRI to model the energy and emissions impact of going from gas baseline to those 2 cases across these 4 end uses. This is a whole building energy modeling, but what you're seeing here are the energy and emissions impacts of these 4 different end uses. So we're not including things that didn't electrify, like lighting or plug loads. They're not part of this picture. We did this across various climate zones across California with a statewide energy emissions impact. We did use hourly emissions factors, but they're for the whole state of California. So you get an apples to apples comparison between, say, LA and San Francisco. And what we found repeatedly was site energy savings. That's the blue bar from blue to the next blue down, and the emission savings, that's the green bar from the green on the left to the green over on the right. We found that those are actually quite significant across, for example, single family usage in this is showing San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Sacramento. The energy savings are pretty consistently somewhere in the 50 to 60% range, even for just the base case. And then if you go to the greenhouse gas savings, now you're talking about 80+% emission savings in both base and higher performance. The reason they're relatively close is that the bulk of the savings comes from going from gas to electric in the first place. That makes a huge difference. And then there are, of course, benefits to be gained that are generally worth it to go to higher efficiency. On the multifamily side, the picture is basically the same. The numbers, of course, are different, but the percentages are pretty similar. Around 50% energy savings in base case, 60-something% in the higher efficiency case, and something like 80 to 90% greenhouse gas emission savings. So these are pretty significant, pretty dramatic savings that you get from going from gas to electric in a building. The greenhouse gas savings are nothing to sneeze at. And if we are serious about decarbonization, this is some low-hanging fruit.
On the technology level, so those packages are important, that although our objective with BETR was to look at the technology level, we did step back, as Alexi just showed, and say, okay, here's some packages residentially. We didn't have the resources to do a bunch of commercial modeling, but that's the residential lens. But at each of the major technologies here on the left is space heating, air source heat pump residential, changing to an air source heat pump in a home from a high efficiency gas furnace. So used a good baseline here of a condensing gas furnace. And on the right is the heat pump. So I'll just mention these two analyses were done based upon the source energy profiles for Southern California, because Southern Cal Edison was the first party that wanted to look at this roadmap. And so in their region in Southern California, you see that if you have a very efficient, the top of the line gas furnace, but you switch to a high efficiency heat pump with an HSPF of 9.5, so a good moderate heat pump, every day available, you're going to drop your levelized energy use in a BTU sense down 21%, but you're going to cut emissions by 60%. And the high efficiency heat pumps have an equal reduction in terms of tiering down to 36% and 71% reduction over that gas baseline. So at a technology level, we do this at the front of each of these two major sections. We show the impact of the technology options. And over here for water heating, with a standard gas water heater, the most common technology installed in homes in California, to a mid heat pump water heater, the most typical one you get, you're going to cut the energy use in half. And if you go to the CO2 heat pumps, that aren't very many models yet, but there's more coming. There is definitely one on the market now for residential, and there's one on the market emerging for commercial use in multifamily. So there you get even a greater energy reduction. So at the technology level and at the package level, electrification is very strong on energy and emission changes. So Alexi is going to speak to the intro to the roadmap. This is our last section, and then we'll be passing to Alexis, and we will take a couple of questions. So write them in the chat now, because we'll take a couple now and more at the end. Go ahead, Alexi.
Sure. So I wanted to give an example. There's not really time in this presentation to go through every single roadblock found and recommendation issued for it, but I wanted to give a little concrete example of that. So for instance, on water heating, heat pump water heaters are real workhorses of electrification. And so I wanted to give an example of this at a glance table that you see on the right here. This shows what recommendations we have made across these three different channels: technology in gray, market in green, and programs in orange. So for example, for unitary 200-volt heat pump water heaters with conventional refrigerant, as Kathy said, these have been around a long time. There's been significant improvements recently. I actually happen to have one in my basement that I did a DIY install on last summer. It went great. I love it. Great rebates from the utility. That is still a need. So we said incentives and financing still relevant, and we got to get programs scaled up on that in the next 5 years. You can see this first piece is 2020 to 2025. And then further out is out to 2030. But then when you're talking about, say, a 240-volt heat pump water heater with a low GWP refrigerant, or the 120-volt heat pump water heaters, now we've got some activities needed on the technology side, manufacturers, researchers, and other partners, to really get these products developed, optimized, and on the shelf. So this shows some of the key activities that we think are high priority actions by the player, the stakeholder that would actually go do the thing, right? Take the action to get there from here. Also, I want to mention what it says down in the corner. Also in the full report, there are also parallel conclusions on emerging and international products. And then we get, as Kathy said, better is layered information. So we get more detailed. That's the at a glance, and then this is where you can go as one of the places to figure out what does that really mean. So for instance, one of the recommendations in space heating has to do with supporting and educating the industry. We're talking about the midstream, designers, installers, those in the construction industry. I'm saying here are some of the roadblocks, right? We've got first cost issues, we've got risk aversion issues, and concern about maybe people who are worried, oh, but the heat pump's not going to provide air that's quite as hot. Well, okay, here are some of the key things we need to do, demonstrations, industry education, good reference materials for site assessments and technology practices, right? So there are things along these lines for each of those 4 at a glance tables comes down to these recommendations in their tables, and then there also is more detailed narrative information in the full report.
Thanks, Alexi. Boy, when I look at this, I feel a bit of pride of the work we did over a 12-month period. And in kind of the high level, we recognized as we went about the end uses and the technology level that there's so many commonalities across the technologies that it didn't make sense to just repeat these in each technology, but rather to step back as an industry and say, here's the collective strategies to building electrification. And we're not the first ones to express these type of things. This is going on happily so across our industry, many parties advocating for and researching and presenting results on reasons and methods for building electrification. But our takeaways were that these 5: build demand, number 1, support the supply chain, number 2, partner with production, closing the cost gap, and aligning programs and policies. Those 5 really articulate what all the technologies need in terms of moving forward more rapidly. And so in the same way that we did it with each end use, there's a roll-up table that presents these 5 outcomes in a table sense and has specific ideas of what to do to build demand and create value and to close the cost gap. They're all in the report in a nice roll-up way, as well as with the detailed information. We hope you'll take a look at this, and we really love to hear any way that you applied it, or if you find it well presented or helpful in the ways that you use it. That's how we, as a nonprofit, spread what we do and hope to, let others leverage our work. So these 5 collective strategies are the path to building decarbonization and electrification. And in closing, in this presentation, our takeaways for you is, geez, the sooner the better. We've had a lot of fun with this acronym, so we love to use it. That there aren't that many technical barriers, that it really is barriers for most of the technologies are available. Other ones you push through the supply and production chains, but get the ones that are already available out into your market and advance them as this last point says, to build demand, especially getting that mid supply chain, work with the suppliers, make the case, help with the business rationale. We get very focused on making these, data representations of energy and emissions, or focused on the interests of the efficiency industry. Get in there on the business side. If a plumber can't have a business model to go to a heat pump water heater when he's forever, or she has been installing gas water heaters for 20 years, they're not going to switch their product. They've got a great model. They put in gas water heaters all day long. We've got the data and the information to help them understand that this is the new technology, and they want to, future for their business. This is the technology they need to be putting in, and let's make that work for everyone. Moving it forward, and the reminder that with only 2% adoption rate, we've got to get heat pumps into the market, or we'll just plain fail at meeting decarbonization and climate change goals. So here's the links. They're here in the PowerPoint, which is, as Connie said, she'll share with everyone. They're on our site. They're probably linked when you register for this webinar. And remember that there's two different items: the roll-up level of the technologies in the summary, but it won't have the detail, and it won't have the detail on the recommendations. So you probably want to take a look at both. So now I'll let Connie let us know if you have some questions for Lexi and I, just a couple before we move to Alexis.
Great. Thank you, guys. We had quite a few questions about, was there any cost data that was looked at in this reporting process?
I was going to mention that because that's a great question, and it's a common question. It's a critically important question. We were told and were directed by our funders that we didn't need to address costs. As you can imagine, that would have been a higher level of funding. But we do have some links immediately at the front of the full report that mentions that BETR doesn't cover costs, but refers you to the E3 study, to an RMI study, and a couple other resources that have looked at cost. And the short answer on cost is it varies. It varies by sector and by technology, and based upon the region, what your base fuel cost is for gas and electricity. And so that's one reason it was wise not to address that complicated topic, but it is. There are others who have done some great studies on it. In new construction, it's a much lower hurdle competitively, and in existing buildings, it does vary. But you can find the links there, and we know who has studied it. We want you to have those resources.
And in some of the roadblocks and recommendations, that topic is covered as well. For instance, there may be first cost differences between gas and all electric options, but there are also probably operating cost differences. And so you may get into split incentive barrier challenges. There may be costs associated with not the technology itself, but things like wiring. If it's that's why the 120 volt heat pump water heater is such an important technology for retrofits in existing homes or buildings served by gas water heaters right now. It avoids the need to do rewiring and or panel upgrades, which is of course a pretty significant cost. So there are some technologies whose raison d'etre, their reason for existence is fundamentally tied to cost. And so that it's not a topic that's covered in great quantitative detail in the study, but it's certainly not ignored.
I just, since we ended a couple minutes earlier, I'm just going to add one point I haven't made in a while, which is that there's a cost to not electrifying. Even if the fuel price analysis shows that you might have a challenge in terms of the technology equipment cost, there are policies. MBI does a lot with policies, a lot of policies either in place or trending that are going to have carbon quantification of buildings' energy use, and those policies could come with fees. Like the city of New York now has a analysis of each building over 25,000 square feet and what the annual carbon impact of your building is. So real estate owners should be looking ahead at kind of safeguarding and future-proofing their building against the measurements that will be in place for accounting for your footprint of your building.
Great.
Can I just jump in on the cost question as well a little bit?
Sure.
This is Alexis, because I did work with E3 on the study that did look at single family and multifamily housing, and we did find that both in retrofit and new construction that it's cost advantageous for people. In fact, all of the single family homes that we're retrofitting achieved bill savings, and something like 80% of them actually achieved overall life cycle cost savings. So meaning when you factored in both the upfront cost and the electricity costs over time, and that's even given that gas is so much cheaper than electricity. So it's really, I would recommend checking out the E3 study that they reference, because it goes into great detail. As Kathy said, it does matter, you know, which region you're in and what technologies you're looking at, but pretty much, you know, at least 75% of people will see life cycle cost savings, so, for for single family.
Okay, well, we went a little over on that. I just wanted to present a clarifying question to Kathy and Alexi. Was this all new construction, or were there retrofits? What buildings were you looking at?
BETR covers both new construction and retrofits, and we are modeling in the residential sector. I believe what we showed here was the new construction case, but we did actually model both. So both of those are covered, and we looked at 5 major building types: single family, multifamily, small commercial, large commercial, and higher ed or institution.
Yeah, and all the tables of status refer to whether it's applicable to new or existing buildings. So both. Good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's get Alexis going here. All right, Alexis, you're in control.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I'm Alexis Karolidis with Point Energy Innovations. I'm an architect. I worked with Rocky Mountain Institute for many years, and I'm really thrilled to be able to show you these concepts today. I'm going to talk more about kind of electrification in action, give you some concrete examples of different types of buildings that successfully have electrified and show you just how successful it has been. So, it worked. Okay, great. So as Kathy and Alexi have just explained, this is really kind of summarizing what they've just told you. To get from the typical building with this huge cloud of CO2 to the completely decarbonized building has these steps, and it involves first efficiency, the low energy building, and then electrification, because electric energy is both possible to decarbonize, but also because it's more efficient, as they've just shown you. And then finally, we can even decarbonize right at the building itself. But why is it that heat pumps are so much more efficient? I think it's important to kind of understand this concept, because what a heat pump is actually doing compared to a natural gas boiler, or even an electric resistance heater or an electric resistance boiler, if you think about a electric resistance hot water heater, is that the natural gas and the electric resistance are simply heating the air or water, whereas the heat pump is transferring heat, just like your refrigerator transfers heat out of the inside of the refrigerator into the ambient space. And it does this 3 to 5 times more efficiently than the electric resistance or natural gas appliance. So you put 1 kilowatt hour in, and you get 3 to 5 kilowatt hours out of your heat pump. And that is behind all of these wonderful savings that we get from various types of heat pump technologies, whether we're looking at variable refrigerant flow technologies, or heat pump water heaters or air source heat pumps that are providing warm or cool air in spaces. So what is the comparison then of HVAC systems that are gas versus electric in terms of efficiency and cost, as well as greenhouse gas? So here we just looked at 4 different types of HVAC systems. So the gray one is a VAV reheat system with a gas boiler. The red one is an electric VAV system with a heat pump water heater. So you can see in the first chart, it's really reducing the energy use because of that heat pump technology that I just showed you how much more efficient it is. And then the blue one is a all-electric DOAS system, which is a dedicated outside air system with a VRF, again, a variable refrigerant flow system. So also heat pump technology. And then finally, the yellow one is electric resistance. So that's less efficient than the 2 heat pump technologies. And you can kind of see how that works with energy use, energy cost, and greenhouse gas emissions. So you're getting tremendous energy savings from the heat pump technologies in particular. Electricity is typically more expensive than gas, so you get some of a hit for the energy cost. But the nice thing is that because the heat pump is 3 times as efficient, even though the electricity may be 3 times more expensive, it's kind of a wash when it comes to operational cost, as you can see in that middle chart. Not so much with the electric resistance yellow technology. And of course, greenhouse gas emissions, as Kathy and Alexi have showed you, are just dramatically better for the heat pump technologies. So real world examples. The nice thing is that those are 4 different types of systems. There are so many more types of systems, and they come to play in buildings in many, many wonderful ways. This is one of my favorite projects. It's a new little office building in Menlo Park called Alma Station, and it's all of the buildings I'm going to show you are all electric. This one uses air source heat pumps to produce hot or cold water for both heating and cooling radiant floors and ceiling panels. So it's a wonderful little building. It's 100% zero net energy, and it's LEED Platinum. It's really just such a nice little project. But you can also do a retrofit. This is Pier 70 in San Francisco, and it's a example of all electric radiant heating with natural ventilation. Also all electric. It just has a 27 kBTUs per square foot energy use intensity. So it's really efficient, and it's using an existing building, turning it into an all electric building. Or another historic renovation using a completely different all electric technology. This one is using air source heat pumps to provide the heat for a VAV system. And actually it's a thermofuser based system, which means each individual has personal control of their environment for really much better comfort. And again, all of these systems are being done in the market, at market rate construction. So this is very much ready to go technology. This is one of my favorite projects because it's a mass timber project. One Daharo in San Francisco, Samsara headquarters. It's a VRF system with point of use domestic hot water. And actually, when we got involved in this project, we changed the plans. They were going to have a gas boiler, and we convinced them to instead convert that to a heat pump. Actually, no, it's point of use. Water heating, in order to eliminate the entire gas hookup for this project. So there's no carbon, it was minimal cost, and that allows this project to not even have to pay for the, the hookup to the building. And speaking of mass timber projects, this is a really wonderful competition winner that we did. Timbertown, it's called, in San Francisco. It's not built, it was just a competition, but it's a radically affordable housing project. And when you guys ask about cost, it's important to know that by using this approach of really reducing the loads of the building, so a super efficient building envelope with shading and good insulation and tight construction allows this building to just use a tiny little bit of heat, and it is electric resistance heat, so not the most super efficient like a heat pump, but you need so little of it, and it's so inexpensive up front that it was able to achieve a very low cost project. And it eliminates so much carbon, something like 9,000 cars worth of for a year of carbon with this project, also eliminating a mile of natural gas piping and 6 miles of avoided hot water piping with the way the building would have been heated typically. So, but of course, everybody's quite concerned about cost. And so I want to dive a little bit more into cost for these multifamily and commercial projects. We did a study for UC called their carbon neutral buildings cost study, because they were really interested when meeting their carbon targets. They want to be carbon neutral by 2025, so they have to really move fast. For their new buildings, would it be more cost effective to electrify or to go with gas, but offset with biogas? So we did this study, and just in a very quick summary of the results, it's really remarkable. There is so much, the costs are so comparative actually. And in fact, in every case, the all-electric solution for both academic and residential and even laboratories was lower with all electric compared to the biogas. And that's even when they factored in, they had these really low cost biogas contracts. So it really is even better than this in reality, because those contracts are kind of hard to come by. So it's, you can see one of the nice things about the residential is in fact that it is in fact that for these projects that they're using the electric resistance, it's actually cheaper up front to go all electric. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of that. This is the Tidelands. It's a mixed use student housing project we did for UC, which again, just like the mass timber project I just showed you, the idea is to design out the heating loads and then provide it with a really inexpensive upfront system, such as this electric resistance heating. Another example of this, sorry, a little lag here with the mouse, but another example of this is a similar project, also a dorm, this one for the San Francisco State University, similarly inexpensive upfront electric resistance heating, super high performing building envelope. And, lest you think that it's only cost effective in new projects. We did a study for UC for this Evans Hall project, whether it would be a better idea to replace or retrofit this project. And interestingly, even no matter if we replaced it or retrofit it, the savings by either constructing or retrofitting the project to be all electric were dramatic. And again, it did start with, sorry, I'm not sure what's happening with this.
Do you need me to take over?
Yeah, it's weird. It's just doing some strange things here. But I'm almost done. So I just have one more slide, just to show you that, you know, when you insulate the envelope, you ended up with 60% energy savings, and you could either provide that with radiant or VRF systems. Either way, you know, you were going to have a significantly more efficient project. And in just a year of operation, even the slightly less efficient retrofit building would save as much energy as was embodied in its 30,000 tons of concrete. So very much cost effective to and energy savings to go with this all electric new or retrofit building. So, and then finally, I just want to show one more example in the next slide of a very simple retrofit, not as involved as the Evans Hall would be, but this is the Santa Rosa Junior College Emeritus Hall. Also would save over 60% energy. And when we converted the natural gas boiler into an electric boiler, and I mean a heat pump water heater, it also saved even more energy, and it was cost effective. So the entire project has a 600,000 net present value savings over the 20-year lifespan. So that is it. I think that was my last slide. I just want to highlight a few lessons learned that I hope these examples have shown you, that electric technology is totally ready for prime time. It is really not more expensive. It's adding less than 1% to construction costs, so upfront costs, and it's providing savings for operations. And it should also be noted that gas systems don't run without electricity either. So as we've seen in some of the disasters that are going on, you know, it's not really a better system, more reliable system either. And finally, electric systems can be backed up with solar batteries. So thank you. That's it. I think we still have some time for questions. So I will hand it back over.
All right. Thank you, everybody. That was lovely. I do have a couple questions here. I just need to get myself a little organized. Oh, cameras. Thank you, Kathy. All right, as you guys are getting your cameras on, let's see. Yes, our presentation, just to reiterate, this presentation, both the recording and a PDF of the slides will come to your inbox tomorrow about the same time as this is wrapping up. So tomorrow at about 12:30. So that was just the public service announcement. And let's see. I've lost my place. I'm so sorry here. Oh my goodness. I apologize. We had so many technical questions come in before. I've lost my place. So what is the pace of retrofits happening for these types of projects?
Do you have a sense of that, Alexis, in the market? What ratio of things you see in the upgrades are going all electric?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. I think because some of the cities are even starting, well, in California in particular, um, to mandate future electric technology instead of gas and to try to get rid of gas. It's going faster. I mean, almost all of our projects, both new and even many of our retrofits, are all electric. Of course, we are geared toward the lower energy, lower carbon projects, but it's just, you know, as I said, it's definitely prime time, and it's not that hard to do. The key with retrofits is to replace systems such as boilers and furnaces when they are at the end of their useful life. You're never going to, it's not going to be cost effective just to rip out a brand new condensing gas boiler that you put in a couple years ago.
Okay.
So that's the key, and there's plenty of retrofits where equipment is at the end of its useful life that are good to go. And it really is detrimental to not replace it with electric equipment when you do have the opportunity to do that retrofit, because that's the chance in the next 15 years that it's going to be cost effective because you're replacing it anyway.
Yeah.
And that speaks to me to the importance both of, for the owner or designer to have a plan so they know what they're going to do when this piece of equipment burns out. We know how to go all electric when the time does come, and also to the importance of supporting the midstream so that when they send out a truck, whether it's residential, my water heater burned out, I want hot water, or whether it's commercial in a slightly different scenario, so that the midstream installer or contractor knows, yeah, I can put in a heat pump to do this, or an electric option. So there's support needed up and down the chain to make that happen at the retrofit level.
It's a really good point.
Do you have another question, Connie? Because we probably can just do one more and we'll look at the chat later for more.
Yeah, we had a question just specific to Alexis's presentation on NPV. What does that mean?
Oh, sure. That's net present value. So it's looking at the costs and benefits over the 20-year period. And so if you had a slightly higher upfront cost, but then you save energy and dollars over the 20 years, the total cumulative savings. So for that project in particular was like $600,000 that the university would save based on doing that retrofit, that all electric retrofit.
Okay, well, we are coming close to time, so I don't want to give you guys anything too burdensome as far as questions, but we did have quite a few people ask about other climate zones and how these would apply in some of the tougher climate zones. So a big question anyway.
I think Alexi could speak just real briefly to cold climate heat pumps, because that's an evolution that wasn't true 10 years ago, and the market assumptions are kind of dated compared to the technology advancements.
Yeah, the cold climate heat pumps have come a long way in the last 10 years, like Kathy said. The Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership, NEEP, has maintained a list of cold climate heat pumps that has grown substantially. These are heat pumps that can produce, off the top of my head, I want to say it is full capacity down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit and 75% of capacity at minus 13 or minus 14 degrees Fahrenheit while remaining, efficient. So there are now products that can do that, and there's a parallel. That's really important for electrification. That's sort of like with compact fluorescent bulbs when they first came out. They were flickery and kind of crummy. We want to avoid that with heat pumps, going from furnaces to heat pumps, and make sure that when you need a cold climate heat pump, that you're using one. And some of the very earlier heat pumps didn't necessarily have that. So some of the high bill issues that people have had is because their heat pump keeps kicking into resistance mode, when a cold climate heat pump would be able to just keep cranking away on the heat pump, getting that 3 times efficiency that Alexis was talking about. And there's a somewhat parallel consideration on water heaters, it's not as extreme, but when you're talking about entering water temperature on water heaters in the winter, that's colder, right? So that is something that manufacturers need to be paying attention to, for example, on the 120 volt heat pump water heater, to make sure that they do that even in winter. But generally speaking, manufacturers are aware of that. NEEP and others have really been advancing cold climate heat pumps and doing a good job doing it. So these technologies are there. You can do it now.
And the nice thing about that too is that you save the huge upfront cost of having to have an extra system, like a backup electric boiler, for instance, or gas boiler, because your heat pump can actually handle that cold climate. So it's really important.
Awesome. Well, we are at time. Alexi, did you want to finish up these last few slides we've got?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I just want to note we've got our Getting to Zero forum coming up late October, as you can see, the 27th to 29th in Times Square in New York City. We'll be back to in-person events. I'm confident this is going to happen. I think we all are, and I'm really excited about it. So this is going to be the premier forum for talking about these kinds of solutions and sharing knowledge. And so I'm excited to see as many folks there as can make it, and conditions permitting, but I think they will. So save that date, please. Then I wanted to invite folks to join us for our next webinar on the 25th of March, a buildings case study jam. Case studies are great. I think they show people the power of the possible. So thanks, Alexis, for showing yours today, and please join us for some more. There are more webinars. You can register for that, and there are certainly more coming up that are not shown here. And you can see the link there. So hop on over to our webpage and join us for a couple others. I also wanted to point out our sister webpage, the gettingtozeroforum.org. There's a resource hub there with hundreds of great documents across lots of different sectors and lots of different kinds of documents. Also maintained by MBI, but it's outside the new build and startup webpage. So I just wanted to note that exists, and there's a lot of great stuff there. Finally, we come out with new content quite often. So take a look on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, as you can see there, or on our webpage. Lots of good stuff there. So thanks everyone for joining today. Connie, I'll leave it to you to close it out.
Right. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for our attendees and to our great panelists today. We will have a follow-up email going out tomorrow with the slides and a link to the recording. So have a great afternoon.